Hey everyone, welcome back to Alf's Mustang Garage. Today we are back on this 6-cylinder to 289 conversion 1966 fastback. The previous video we removed the engine and the transmission to kind of jump start this project. Today's video is all going to be about removing the front suspension. Okay, now when you work on Mustangs, you see a lot of different Mustangs, and the unfortunate thing that I see a lot of is you get people that do the conversion from the 6-cylinder, but they don't change anything that they don't have to. So you still got, you know, your smaller spindles, the whole suspension, nothing has changed. It's just all the original 6-cylinder stuff, and now you have the 289. It is highly recommended to go to the upgraded V8 spindles, the larger bearings. At the same time, we're going to be putting the power disc brakes on it. That way everything's all kind of factory correct. We're not doing anything high dollar on the front brakes like Willwoods or something like that. You know, we're just kind of using the stock Kelsey Hayes 4-piston calipers, which I highly recommend. I'll talk about what kits I like to use later on. But anyways, we're going to tackle the suspension. We're going to give it the V8 upgrade, and that's what today's video is all about. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is remove the top shock here. I like to have the vehicle on the ground so the weight's kind of pushing that shock up. We can unbolt it from here, and hopefully we have enough weight in there. Engine's out. There we go. And now we can undo the shock mount and release that, and then the shock is just kind of like ready to be removed once we lift the car up in the air. Just like that. Yep. Bam. Little bit of tension. Okay, we got the car up in the air, we got the wheel off. One thing, if you're not really aware of the 6-cylinder Mustangs, they have 4 lugs. So that's why we're gonna take off these light duty small drum brakes, the 9-inchers. We're gonna get rid of the spindles. But first thing we're gonna do is get the shock out, because what we're gonna be doing is compressing the spring, getting the spring out, and then I can probably just take everything off as a whole assembly rather than taking the drums off and all that kind of fun stuff. So. So we got the shock out the top now. What I'm going to do now is disconnect the brake line, because again, I'm going to kind of emphasize on pulling this whole assembly out as one unit. So what I'm going to do is break this brake line free. I like using these line wrenches so we don't round off the nut. Sometimes these things have been on there for quite a while. Oh, that one came off really easy. So it looks like it's been replaced. I don't think that's not a factory line. That's why it came off super easy. So every car is going to be a little different. You just never know what you're getting into until you're into it. So pull the retaining clip off. Okay, I have these really cool tools. They're like, when you disconnect a brake line, you don't want it dripping all over everything. This kind of will hold and seal up your brake line from leaking everywhere. I do this a lot on, you know, disc brake conversions that I'm doing. We'll just take this tool like this. Okay, so that'll keep that line all sealed up. I mean, we are going to be doing, you know, a new master cylinder and booster and everything eventually, but it just kind of keeps all that from dripping all over the place. So from here, we can go ahead and remove our sway bar link right there. Just have a 9/16 holding it and 9/16 taking it off from down here. Oop. Okay, we're going to want to go ahead and undo our outer tie rod here. Usually there's a cotter pin right there to disconnect.
That's what you get when people start changing them randomly throughout the years.
Yeah. All right, just undo our castle nut right there. Okay, now a really good way to get this to separate, just hit it with a hammer. Now, in our case, we're not reusing this stuff. I generally, for good practices, try to, you know, not destroy things when I take them off, even though I know I'm not going to be reusing it. But if you just like hit this side of the spindle right here, it's going to like shock it, and it should just kind of drop out. So. Yeah, I'm trying. I'm also trying to swing with the camera in my way. Whoops. What was that? There you go. It's hard to swing with the camera in your way, but yeah, you hit it just right there on the corner and the side, and just kind of shock it, and it'll just kind of pop right out. Okay, so now you have your strut rod right here. It connects to the lower control arm, comes all the way up here, and we take it off of this end here, and then it can kind of just stay and again kind of come off as a whole unit. Okay, so you got a nut.
There you go.
Ooh, see this support? It's not welded right there.
Oh, hey, that's interesting.
See that?
Yeah. Okay.
Washer. And bushing.
March fingers a second.
Yep.
There you go.
Okay. Another thing you could do to help get these off is you could put like a floor jack on this and just kind of change the angle of that, and then you could like get that off a lot easier. Okay, so we're back up on the top of the car. We're gonna compress the coil spring, okay? This tool is the only tool that I recommend when it comes to compressing your coil spring. It's the safest, it's the most easiest to use when it comes to, you know, doing this anywhere, where it's in your garage or shop or whatever. I will post a link in the description as far as where you can get it, but that's a part number from National Parts Depot. Okay, so this tool installs just like your shock absorber. It's gonna go down into the spring saddle where your shock would mount into, okay? So we're gonna drop that down to place. You're gonna put your shock mount on. Put the nuts on. You don't necessarily have to crank them down. You just kind of have to get them down and bite some threads. Okay. And then from here, you have a plate that goes on. Use your upper shock bolts to bolt that in. You have a flat washer, a bearing, and a nut. Okay, and then from underneath on the lower shock, you have two nuts. That's gonna mount the coil spring compressor to the spring saddle, and then you tighten this nut and it's just gonna compress that spring. Okay, once you have the lower shock mount bolts, or I'm sorry, nuts on there for the tool, just like you're installing or removing a shock, now you can run this nut. It's a big one, 1 1/4 inch. Okay, now that you've compressed this a little bit, if you notice from the video, the whole assembly just kind of rose up. Okay, so now that it's partially compressed, you can undo the saddle bolts right here. There's a nut on the bottom side of the control arm. That's why I kind of like to compress them partially like this so you can easily access that bottom nut, and it undoes the spring saddle, and then we can compress it up further and get the whole control arm out of the way. And then we can drop the coil spring out of the way. Okay, before I completely undo it, like this assembly won't be supported anymore. So it's gonna like, you know, probably drop out. Maybe not initially, you know, every car is gonna be a little different. So I just kind of put my floor jack underneath the drum to support it while I remove the nuts on the spring saddle, and then I can lower the jack, and I might have to hit it with a hammer a couple times to get it to break free, but that way it doesn't just come down on you if you're laying underneath this car or something. That's just a 9/16 on that one. Second nut off. Okay, so now both those nuts are off. We're going to use this pry bar and try to get them pry, and I'll hit it. Sometimes they're kind of been on there for a long time, so they just kind of grab a hold, but yeah, sometimes you got to get just a little bit western with it.
Now we can take the upper control arm bolts out.
Yep. Okay, so now the coil spring is free from the upper control arm, and it's being compressed and held in place by that tool. So we're going to compress the spring, you know, just a little bit more to allow room for the upper control arm to come out, and we'll undo the upper control arm from the engine bay side. So yeah, the upper control arm bolts come through the shock tower right here. You can see Justin doing his side over there. Just gonna press my spring a little bit more while he's doing that. So now we can pull our control arm out like this. Okay, and she just kind of is still all attached. One thing to keep in mind, in my application it doesn't really matter, okay, because we're changing the whole stance of this car, V8 engine, but if you're in a situation where you're just taking this off to put it back on for whatever reason, you have alignment shims back here, okay? You want to be careful when taking these off so you can keep track of, you know, how many are on each side. In my case, it's not really going to matter. Whole thing's going to have to get all realigned anyways. We might do a Shelby drop on it, but I'm not quite 100% sure yet. But anyways, just something to be mindful when you're taking these old control arms off of these old Mustangs. Okay, so now that the upper control arm is out of the way, we can now decompress the spring and completely remove it from the car. Okay, now you have this spring out of here. You can kind of get a good visual of how this thing actually like works in case it wasn't like 100% clear. But this thing kind of just goes down in like a shock absorber. Obviously you have like the, you know, the upper mount in there, but it just kind of mounts in place in the saddle like that. And then as you tighten it, it's just gonna like pull this unit up and compress the spring, if that kind of makes sense, I guess, because here's the upper part of the spring, here's, you know, the bottom down here, and with it all mounted up in the car, it just literally just kind of pulls it up and uses the shock tower up top and the spring saddle to compress everything, and then you get the control arm off and you can safely decompress it, and it's totally the best tool that I would by far recommend for anyone to use for these. We're at the last part of this assembly. Obviously, if you're doing this on the ground, you can use a floor jack to kind of catch all this stuff, because there is quite a bit of weight when you add both control arms, spindles, strut rod, the whole drum brake assembly and everything. So, but, you know, I have a Justin instead of a floor jack. So we're gonna undo the lower control arm bolt right here. And just a nut on the back side, 3/4, and then this nut here, or this bolt here. Okay, I got the washer and the nut. Let's see if that'll just come right out. Yeah, conveniently, you got a whole power steering bracket. Okay, she's all yours. All right. Okay, so there is your front suspension taken off. Upper control arm, lower control arm, coil spring, spindle, drum brake assembly. The whole thing is gone. All removed as one assembly. Okay, well, I think that's gonna conclude this video for our 289 conversion car. So again, suspension is coming off because this is all light duty stuff. We're gonna put all new heavy duty factory V8 kind of stuff on there. Maybe do a Shelby drop, don't know yet. But anyways, if you found the video helpful, give us a thumbs up. If you want to follow us along, subscribe to the channel. Those little things do help us in order to produce more videos, which I hope are helpful for you guys. So we'll catch you next time.